There seems to be no reason to apprehend any immediate disorder in this territory. W. W. Loring, Brevet Colonel, U.S. Army, Commanding Department of New Mexico. Silence fell in the rickety shanty of Dooney's tavern as O'Brien prepared for the duel. He himself saw no point in such drama. If you didn't agree with a fellow, best to settle it quick with your fists. But at the grand age of 29, he was older than most of the lads, and they'd turned to him as referee. He ought to be flattered, he guessed. All the miners in Avery had crowded the tavern to watch. O'Brien ignored them, spoke quietly with the seconds to be sure they had done as he'd told them, and kept an eye on the nervous principals. They were miners too, Denning, a Georgian, and Peters from New Jersey. Best of friends they had been, until news of the great conflict to the east had at last found its way into Colorado. Hurrah for the North and hurrah for the South had been the first volleys. Others had joined the dispute, till the clear mountain air rang with bullets and violent words. Now these two fine young lads, grave determination in their eyes, faced each other across a rough table to settle on behalf of the infant town of Avery the question of who was right. The other tables, all three, were pushed back to the walls, with the crates and the stumps that were seats. Men stood atop them the better to see, blocking the light of the greasy candles set where the wallboards met at odd angles, and adding their looming shadows to the already ghoulish atmosphere. The doctor, an infamous grumbler, arrived at long last. O'Brien greeted him with a nod and stepped forward. "Shaughnessy, Morris," he said, summoning two men with heavy six-shooters to stand by the table. "If either man fires before I count 3, you're to shoot him down." He took out a handkerchief, provided by Mr. Dooney himself, and gave a corner of it to each combatant to hold in his left hand. In the right, each held a Colt Navy pistol, carefully prepared by the seconds. The distance between the men, marked by table and handkerchief, was no more than 4 feet. It seemed a short distance indeed, but O'Brien had gotten the seconds to agree to it. "Make ready," he said, and the men brought up their pistols, leveling them nearly breast to breast. O'Brien felt an odd pride in them as their eyes met and held, for each must have sensed his own death in the cold tunnel aimed at his heart. "1," said O'Brien, as every man in the room held his breath. 2, 3. The guns roared together, a great flash, and the duelists fell shrouded in smoke. The tavern exploded with noise. Men jumped down from their perches, whooping and cursing. O'Brien pulled the table aside, while the doctor, on his knees, sought the pulse of the victims. "He's alive," cried the doctor, his hand on Peter's wrist. He moved to Denning. "They're both alive." The miners exclaimed at the miracle. O'Brien, leaning against the table, smiled as the doctor tore open the Georgian shirt to search for his wound. He found none, no mark on either man, save for a red spot on his chest. The duelists got to their feet, looked at each other in wonder, then turned their eyes to O'Brien. "There now," he said, folding his long arms. "It's settled the way it began, with nothing but a lot of hot air." The spectators burst into laughter, and the faces of the late contenders dawned with the understanding that they'd been betrayed. The New Jerseyan grabbed his second by the collar. "Powder," said the man between gasps of laughter. "Red said to use powder only." "I'll leave him alone, Peters," said O'Brien. "Didn't you agree to fight by my rules?" "O'Brien, you bastard," said Denning, but a grin of relief broke across his face. "I'd be a bastard indeed if I let you make marry a widow over such nonsense," said O'Brien. Denning laughed, blushing, and shook hands with Peters. Both men claimed they'd been knocked down by the force of the powder, rather than by fear. The company, having had their fill of conflict for the moment, hardly agreed, and as one turned to Dooney demanding liquor. O'Brien helped the mortified doctor to his feet, saying, "Don't be embarrassed. You'll still have your fee.